Within any game with an active community, there's something to bound up to spark a controversy. And today we're gonna discuss about certain cards that did exactly that. As today, I'm presenting to you guys the top 10 most controversial cards of 2018.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Number 10. The card that's going to take the number 10 spot is Gust Blaster Dragon. And yeah, depending on where you were located in the world, this card was either revealed in 2018 or 2019. But as seen as at least some people saw the card in 2018, including myself, means I have the excuse and therefore I am including it on the list. A lot of you might already know what the deal is with this card and why it's on the list, but for those who don't know, Gust Blaster was the second VR for Shadow Paladin and also the second VR revealed of that specific set, the Vilus Deleter. And at the time, Shadow was in a decent spot with their all-round pressure in the form of chain calling, board control and high power columns, but the clan had three vital problems. One, it died against Protect because it couldn't multi-tag or they didn't have any card restriction to their disposal, but they had some good early game aggression in the form of Blast the Dark, Maka and the main, so in a sense they could combat this typical force issue with their early game. Second, their retire skills are chosen by their opponent, so this might not always be that of a problem for some opponents as you can play around it, so where Kakiro can just eliminate annoying units, Shadow needs to spam these skills to kill specific units. And lastly, third, Promise Daughter. So a lot of people were expecting that the new Shadow VR would fix these problems, not knowing that clans shouldn't be perfect. Every clan needs to have weaknesses, otherwise why should you play any other deck? So after we already had a somewhat disappointing triple R in the form of Darkbond Trumpeter, we could safely say that the expectation for Gust Blaster Dragon was getting pretty damn high. So when he finally was revealed and the card didn't state auto play this card win the game or continuous all shadow problems were now fixed, resulted in a community uproar. People quickly started complaining that it was trash because it didn't have a guard restrict and that it was a simple beat stick with a lot of crits. It went even so far that multiple YouTubers made videos about it. Heck, even I made a video about it. Twice! But I'm not going to defend this card in this video. If you want my take on it, then click on the link on top. You can argue that this card was more controversial than some cards on the list, but as soon as this card was revealed on December the 31st and January the 1st, depending on your time zone, and that the whole debate was really kicked off in the new year, made me put this card on the bottom of the list. It was either that or waiting for next year. Number 9. For number 9 spot, we have Evil Eye Vitva Emperor Shiranui Rinne. Yeesh. Better known as Rinne. This card almost single-handed made a new archetype from its decent to basically OP tier overnight. When Dominate was revealed, everybody lost their shit. Using your opponent's units to attack them looked really broken on paper. But when we got the first Dominate support wave in the form of Oboral Trial Deck and a Demonic Advent booster, it became very clear that yes, it was an annoying deck to fight against, but you could easily play around it. Dominate was primarily a deck that could multi-tag with a lot of poke numbers, but they do it with different mechanics. So a defensive trigger or clans that could power up their Vanguard could easily deal with it. Couple that with the fact that every deck could play around the mechanic in the first couple turns, made the deck quite a bit lackluster. With this track record, most people didn't believe that Dominate would be an actual tier 1 deck. Strong rogue deck, but not certified tier 1 deck. Enter Divine Dragons Apocrypha, the set that almost destroyed Vanguard. This set had only a handful of Dominate support cards, but they brought the deck to a whole new level. Their grade 1 made insane power columns, so together with a lot of multi-attacks, they could now also generate high powered attacks with ease. But the real evildoers were Zanki and Rinne. These cards force your opponents to call units from their hand to the field, they negate any kind of effect and they immediately attack you. This has almost zero counterplay because you force them to call either strong units and they can guard with triggers, or they call triggers but you lose that high defense number. So you minus 3 cards on hand, then they multi-attack and then they attack with high powered attacks on their own. And if that wasn't enough, their GB free skill gave all Dominate units plus 10k and a crit, meaning even if you caught a trigger, they could still hit you. This meant that when they could go into Rinne with the GB free active, meant you already had lost a match. The only decks that could survive this had an insane draw engine, or had some form of countering this card with some obscure play. And because of this, this card is well deserving of this spot. Number 8. For number 8, we don't have a single card, but an entire set. And that is Bermuda Triangle's extra booster, Divas Festa. This set was so insane that it brought Bermuda Triangle to the top spot for, I believe, the first time during the G era. And believe it or not, a year after this set, they even won Worlds without any extra support, at least on the Japanese side. They got insane amount of drive checkings with Reindeer, they could potentially stride on turn 1 with Riviere, got insane free power attack combos with Coral, the easiest and most free pluses you could think of with Engie, one of the strongest free restanders that wasn't archetype restricted, a more powerful and more consistent version of the Gear Chronicles aggressive Avenir Phoenix Stride, 6 perfect guards instead of the usual limited 4, a grade 2 that counts as the heal trigger for G-guards, the strongest G-guards in the game that also is free to use and can flip itself face down for reuse, a win condition with Luckle, and a bullshit crit trigger that could make any kind of attack deadly and at the same time counters Rinne. Fun fact, Bermuda also had a G-guard just like Gear Chronicle that could already counter Rinne. So yeah, this set was insane. Until this day, Engie is still a viable Bermuda deck in Premium, almost a year after initial release and still very strong. The community went nuts every time one of these cards were revealed, and for obvious reasons, and therefore for the number 8 spot we don't have one of these cards but the entire set. Number 7. For number 7 we have Interdimensional Knight Lost Legend. This is relatively a new card and just got released into the TCG, but everybody lost their shit when the card got revealed last year as the poster card for the Answer of Truth. This came completely out of left field where we were still in the middle of the AL4 reveals when they suddenly dropped that after AL4 and Ultra Rare that we will get the Answer of Truth set. And then out of nowhere they revealed the skill of Lost Legend, and with that the community went nuts. Grade 4s in main decks, strides in the reboot, triple force markers a turn, please nerf! The community's main uproar around this card was the potential of super force marker acceleration. You could get 2 force markers a turn when you go into Lost Legend, and then if the grade 4s also got a force marker, you could be looking at a triple marker spam. And when Novell and Excavate revealed that grade 4s could have markers, made everybody even more concerned about the power creep that Gears would bring. Also, a thing that made people concerned were the grade 4s themselves. We didn't have any information regarding these units, and a lack of information is always a source of fear. But now that everything is revealed and we've seen the decks in action, we can say that there was nothing to worry about. It's a strong deck, but it's in the realm of fair decks in Standard. But Lost Legend wasn't the only card that made a huge uproar when it was initially revealed, but later turned out to be a letdown compared to what people thought the card will do. Our number 6 spot is also such a card, but in a much more faster and stronger meta, meaning people were even more concerned about the card. Number 6. Our number 6 card is Genesis Dragon Integral Messiah. This card makes so many people lost their shit. A stride that could turn an opponent's hand to 5 random cards in a clan that could multi-attack like crazy. I mean, even this stride enables multi-attacking and hits for 36k with a second skill. And those 5 random cards could be useless cards to guard with. It was all up to chance. You as a player could not play around its first skill. It was all up to the fact that you would get a guardable hand or not. And even if you could survive the turn, you could probably not make a comeback with only 1 or 2 cards left. This card could easily make opponents go -10, as seen as every deck played with a gigantic hand size at the time. But when this set was released, the card made literally no impact at all. The only Leering Joker deck that was played was Chaos, and it was way more impressive than Messiah. The reason why it didn't work was because of the fact that this card could be used only as a third stride, and that was way too slow. Games ended most of the times at first or second stride. You can go to its Wikiapp card page and see all the people talking about how OP this card was during the time it was released. But just like Lost Legend, this card was all fluff but no substance. Now, for the top half of this list, we're going to see the cards that justified their uproar, as seen as the next cards made a splash in the meta. Number 5. For number 5 we have Waterfall. And most of you probably already know how I personally feel about this card. I even made 2 videos about the card, and I won't be excluding the idea that I might even make more in the future. So what made this card so controversial? It was the fact that we got a guard restrict in the very first set of the reboot, and a sentinel restrict in Force Clan at that. People were concerned about the direct power creep this card could mean for the clan, and even Standard itself. There's a reason why people say I lost because I couldn't go in Waterfall, or won because I got my Waterfall in time. Kagero can still manage to be viable in today's meta without new support because of the insane power Waterfall can bring with itself. And yeah, this card is balanced because it's in Kagero, a weaker rearguard clan. But think about the future when rearguards aren't that weak anymore, and this might bite us back in the ass. Number 4. For number 4, we got a premium exclusive controversial card because in Standard, this card in Clan was viewed as weak. I'm of course talking about No Life King, Death Anger. You already know what I'm referring to, it's the NOK OTK loop with Enigmatic Assassin that had been taking premium by storm ever since the AO4 set was released. Until the day it got hit, people were demanding that the card got nerfed. This deck could win games without any interaction with your opponent, and with the turbo build, it's even more oppressive. For every counterblast, the deck could generate an extra 2 40k rearguard attacks and a 40+k Vanguard attack with a crit. And you go +1 and gain a protect marker while doing so. Meaning even if your opponent survived it, they have no way of killing you next turn. The whole reason the turbo build came to be was the fact that the only way to kill an NOK that didn't brick was a faster NOK. So with all that, it isn't even weird to imagine why everybody was screaming for its ban. Heck, even Solemn Vanguard that played with the turbo build stated that Assassin needs to be hit. But now it's time to look at the top 3 most controversial cards that came out in 2018. Number 3. For number 3, we have Chronovisor Heritage. Every card that Gear Chronicle would get after next stage would result in a public outcry. But in Heritage Gauge, it had some solid base to go for. Because think of Integral Messiah, but then faster and more consistent. Chronovisor would have been an okay card if Gears didn't got the Zodiac Time Beast G-Guard in the same set. This meant the card could be used as a potentially second stride, and that was true for most cases. The fact that you got 2 turns on your second stride meant that Gear Chronicle was a solid tier 1 deck. Heritage made so many problems go away. Locked units will be unlocked after your first turn, also defensive triggers would mean nothing, and multi-attacking got a whole new meaning with 2 turns at your disposal. Thanks to this card, Gears can still win some matches in premium even before they got their first support wave. So thanks to Steam Tamer Elishu, Chronovisor Heritage became an insane card that made the community go nuts. But it wasn't the only card in this set. We already seen Rinne that had the same effect, but there is even more. Number 2. Our number 2 spot goes to Dragon Deity of Destruction, Gize, or Geese, depending on how you want to pronounce that. When this card was revealed, everybody went nuts. His skill was game breaking, but also the fact that you needed all ZRs, and those were expensive cards. Gize embodied pay to win in Vanguard at the time. It was also the dullest deck to play or play against. There was no player interaction if one person piloted the deck. And don't talk about the mirror. That's the most saddest thing you could see, as seen as they couldn't do damage on either of each other. Bushiroad announced that this card would change how we would play Vanguard, and they did deliver on those words. But is it really what we wanted? Well, that differs depending on the person you ask. But the fact that we're still talking about this card, and every time we get new release, the first thing people look at is, can we make it work with Gize, Gize OTT, Gize Gridora, Gize Angels, Gize Himiko, Gize Gears, to name a few, means that the card made a huge impact in premium till this day. Now, let's see what was the most controversial card of 2018. The number 1 most controversial card of 2018 is Xerath Dragon of End of the World, Dust. For those who are new and wondering what's the problem with this card, let me explain. The card has gone through 2 big nerfs. Ever since its conception, one was thanks to the new guarding rules that came with the reboot, but the first nerf was of the result of a major public outcry of the community. Before the reboot, you couldn't guard with grades higher than your Vanguard grade, meaning that you couldn't guard with your grades 2s from hand when its skill was used. But the biggest thing and the main issue of this card was its final effect. When the card was officially released, it stated that the card dealt a damage regardless of the amount of damage, meaning if you straightened into this thing while your opponent was at 5 damage, you could have won the game right then and there. And this didn't sit well with players. an auto win condition with zero counterplay whatsoever. We had this effect before with Conquering Supreme Dragon, Dragon Egg Vanquisher VMAX. But that card was a lot harder to pull off and your opponent could play around it. Also, Narukami wasn't a strong clan, so nobody cared. But Dust was available to one of the strongest decks in the G era. Gear Chronicle, Dark Irregulars, Spike Brothers, and even Pale Moon. Each of these decks could push your opponent to 5 damage without any trouble, meaning this card would kill the meta and probably even the game, if Giza didn't do that before him. People were so mad that they made their own petition on errataing Dust, and I can't confirm if this actually made a change, but Bushiroad later announced that they errataed the card to its current form, and this was before the printing started, so you can't find any version of Dust with the original skill. This was the second time in history that this happened. The first time was with Gil's Shade. Her second skill was originally free of cost and it didn't specify that it needed to be called to an open rearguard circle, meaning that you could make an infinite loop with Nightcrow to power up your Night Spinel to infinity, making the 7C Grade 1 rush even more oppressive. The fact that this card made such an uproar in the community that Bushiroad was forced to errata the card makes this absolutely the #1 controversial card of 2018. And there you have it, the 10 most controversial cards of 2018. Do you agree with the list, or do you think some cards should have made a list? Then let me know in the comments down below. Also, what future topics should I cover in these top 10s? These kinds of videos are a great way to showcase specific topics with 10 concrete examples. I did a bad card design video about Waterfall to talk about bad card design in Vanguard in general, and took Waterfall as a great example, as seen as it's one of the more known cards. But I could also do a top 10 video about it to go more in depth with different examples. So let me know what you guys like to see in the future. But as always guys, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one.